Hi, this is Stephanie Miller from The Stephanie Miller Show. Please enjoy this exclusive clip from my show on Political Voices Network. It is heavy. Here it is. And Susanne and Russ join us now. Good morning, guys. I am so excited about this. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us. Yeah, people can use that as a weight if they want as well.
It's heavier than my girl weights.
Multi-useful.
I was saying to you, you'd be the kids I'd cheat off of in school because you did all the homework. It's hard to win a Pulitzer, isn't it? Good for you. So, Susanne, I've been pestering Jody forever. Every time I see you on TV, I'm just like, oh my God, you're so fantastic. And what is that accent? I'm like, oh, Canada. Can I move in with you if this election goes south?
I may be moving back home, so we'll see.
I'm coming with you.
It's a great country. It's a great country.
Yeah, it is.
But, I'd totally forgotten. There's literally, we were just talking off air about all of his criming, and I thought, oh, okay, so your book, this was the basis for the fraud conviction. This is different than the Jack Smith's filing. And, we were talking about by January 20th, he was on to his next criming with the classified documents. But talk a little bit, just because you said to me off air, you were even shocked by the Jack Smith filing. And dear God, you marinate in this. Talk about that a sec.
Well, I mean, just the level of detail in it was really something. And it was sort of forced, if Trump, based on events, he sort of forced their hand to do this through the courts. Yeah, it was really, I just thought shocking in the detail of it.
Yeah.
I don't know how it's gonna land with the American people, but.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have, as I would say, Russ, all the receipts here. This is the entire title is Lucky Loser, How Donald Trump Squandered His Father's Fortune, Created the Illusion of Success. Dear God, I wish someone did this kind of reporting before 2016. But talk a little bit, because you guys, you had access to never-before-seen financial records, lawsuit documents, tax returns from both Fred and Donald Trump. I mean, you went even deeper than the first one, right?
We went a lot deeper. Yeah, I think this is like sort of the result of almost 10 years of work by Susanne and I, and with other colleagues also. First big story we did is the one that won the Pulitzer Prize, which was how much money he had inherited from his father. That was really enlightening. It sort of changed the dialogue of his life story, always saying he did everything himself just with a small loan from his father. And then we, over the next couple of years, did two other big stories that were based on 20 years worth of his tax returns. Actually, in a way, almost 30 years of his tax returns that showed where the money came from during those years and where it went, and what lost money. And the big demarcation part was the businesses that he was really involved in running and making the decisions on. Overall, there were a lot of failures and they required infusions of cash. And where he made his money was, again, from his father. That money continued to come in. And then from just a wellspring of cash on The Apprentice. And then we just felt like at the end of that, we had three big stories over 5 years. But there was so much more to tell, to tie it all together in one piece. And that's the result of that is this book, that we feel like you can really see the man we came to know in the White House sort of developing and emerging, and how different he is from his father and the succession battle.
Yeah.
All of this is sort of an epic story over a century.
Speaking of Apprentice, Susanne, this is kind of an opinion question. Is there a hotter place in hell for Mark Burnett at some point?
Wow, right? And I think, looking back, he didn't set out to pave the way to the White House for this guy, but paging Mark Burnett now, you have a chance now to speak up, and you've chosen not to. And it's interesting. He moved to distance himself from Donald Trump after the Access Hollywood debacle in October 2016, and he put out a statement. And a lot of people sort of left off there. I think just people who were just not paying a lot of attention. But we found he had a role in the inauguration, and so did some of his producers. Yeah. And what the current state of their relationship is really unknown, but we have not heard from Mark Burnett.
Yeah, I mean, this book is described as, describing a picture of the financial ineptitude and deceptions at the core of Trump's identity. I mean, the fact that, he's always been portrayed as this financial genius who would do better on the economy you two in particular must just have been losing your mind, because this is entirely a fiction that was created, wasn't it?
Yeah, it does get to be pretty exhausting. You're right. I mean, the thing that we encountered is in 2016, he starts running for office. He's saying, I'm going to do the same thing for the country I've done for my businesses.
Wow.
No, nobody really knows what that is because it's a really small company, privately held. There are no public records on it at all. So that's what led us down this road. But everything you lift on it, you see that this was all like kind of smoke and mirrors, right? Yeah. When he designs businesses, they really have trouble. And the thing that he's great at, bringing attention to himself, that benefits other businesses that other people run and stuff. But you don't see in the course of this story a great business mind, right, who sees markets and
right.
exploits them. You don't see somebody who designs businesses with balance sheets in mind and excellent pro formas, right, where he can see how much money it's going to bring in. It's just he builds things, I think, that are kind of thrones to himself. Yeah. And he believes they're going to make money just because his name's on it. And this book is a litany of examples of that not working.
He sits on a throne of lies, basically.
Yes.
Yes.
That's pretty good.
Suzanne, I love how you guys take us back, though. Fred inflated his construction costs, I'm reading, to secure generous FHA loans and then skimped on construction expenses, pocketing the difference and setting high rents based on the original fictitious projections.
Yeah.
I mean, in some ways, he is his daddy's son. I mean, this seems to be like a theme, right?
It's interesting. Some ways he is, in other significant ways he's not. Though I mean, that you just mentioned one, which is they're good at spotting loopholes and kind of getting up to some of those shenanigans.
Cheating? You mean cheating?
Yeah.
I don't think the IRS calls it shenanigans, but okay.
We also, it's interesting. One of the funnier things we found when we were doing the research is we went down to the Library of Congress to look at some documents we'd heard about that were involved Fred and another lawyer. And when we saw them, Fred actually was writing in all caps. Like, I couldn't believe it. I phoned Russ and I was like, you're not going to believe this. So there's some similarities there. Fred was a bit of a showman as well, and we show that in the book. But, you see Fred, and Fred sort of had that trait, but he always sort of did it after he would actually have something built. And Donald sometimes is all talk and then a project would never happen.
Yeah.
But I think the more important differences about them were, debt comes to mind. Fred loved cash. He kept a lot of cash on hand. And Donald, was all about debt. Things like that, personal guarantees. Fred never believed in them. Donald said he didn't believe in them, but he would he did a number of them during his career, and it got him in trouble. And then you see, though, once Fred decided that Donald was the son that was going to take over the company, he just never wavered in his support of his son that we could find out. And something may have gone on behind the scenes we don't know about, but he was publicly behind his son.
Yeah, you guys
all
know
the way.
Probably the quote better than I do about history rhyming, something. But the 1954 article you mentioned, as Fred described as a pariah feeding on government largesse and gouging his tenants, but Fred never faced serious consequences. How does that sound familiar? And I just, Russ, I was going to say, the other through line is just, okay, again, this is an opinion, but what a jerk he's always been. There's two stories. One is they joined the Atlantic Beach Club, right? Mm-hmm. And where Donald, the fourth of 5 children, would wait by the pool for arriving families to pass by in their street clothes and then soak them with a monster cannonball off the high diving board. Cut to, he arrived by helicopter one time at the QVC headquarters. He directed the pilot not to land on the custom heliport created for him because he didn't want to muddy his loafers. The pilot instead landed in the parking lot, damaging dozens of employees' cars with flying debris. Does that not sum up his presidency and everything about him?
I think it probably doesn't. I think it's a key component of his presidency. But you're right. There's not a big amount of empathy there. And I think also you mentioned his childhood when you start to see these traits emerge. There was an episode at the military academy his dad sends him to where they're going to have the yearbook photos taken. And he wants the status of doing really well there, but he doesn't really seem to want to do the work for it. So he borrows a friend's dress uniform that has all these medals on it, right? And has his photo taken, and that's the one.
Stolen valor?
Yeah, it's a little. I mean, the valor in this case is like being really good at making beds and cleaning latrines. So I don't know about the valor part of it, but that's a key part of his identity, to put on the show of success, but not actually do the work and have the attention to detail to make that happen.
I so appreciate you guys because I'm just, I'm reading the New York Times, like just summation of your book, but just talking about, they say reporters have been repeating his lies for decades. In 1985, with little evidence, 60 Minutes called him a billionaire. This helped create in the popular imagination, the myth of a financial genius. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is why journalism is so important, Susanne, right? Because here we are. At the threat of losing our democracy, to this charlatan. There's no other word, right?
Right, and I think we have the benefit of hindsight here, but it does sort of show that first cut of history when you're writing a story for the next day, the facts in it matter because they get repeated over and over sometimes and passed into history as truth. And that's what we saw with Trump. He was successful in getting the idea that he was a billionaire into the mainstream of America by repeating a lie. He was appropriating his father's wealth for years and just lying about what he was worth. And the Trump Organization was a small, tightly held company, and there was no way to check it. And he succeeded in sort of snowing everybody about that. Yeah. And now it matters. And we went back and we looked at sort of where it started. And how, first of all, he appropriated his father's wealth and said, he was worth hundreds of millions of dollars when, in fact, that was his father's. And then as time went on and that had succeeded, he started then in diminishing his father's achievements, sort of to make himself look large. He started making his father out to be just this small-time outer borough builder. Yeah. And none of it really went checked because he was, Russ and I laugh. We grew up in more Russ so because he's been in New York longer than I have. I moved here in 2000, but Trump is always seen as sort of this sideshow character. He was more fodder for Page Six than he was the Wall Street Journal. Yeah. So these things just happened, and now it matters.
Yeah,
and that's why we went back and looked at it.
Yeah, I'll say. And Russ, just finally, this whole. The Apprentice, section. You say the production team labored to disguise their star's eternal confusion and incompetence. Oh my God! And you quote one as saying, "Our job was to reverse engineer the show to make him not look like a complete moron." Oh my God! Is that not the story of his life? Right?
Well, that's an interesting idea. It is a key component of who he was. That show is not only important to his image, which I think we've all accepted, right? They did an amazing job of portraying him as like really competent, a huge businessman. That has sustained, and that's really the base of his support among voters. That has not been shaken at all. But it also very much saved him financially. I think we would be hard pressed to think that without his father and without The Apprentice, on his own, he would have ever been a businessman of any significance at all.
Yeah.
But all of this together in this weird century where the media was really interested in wealth, and our views of being like ostentatious about wealth very much changed. He was just a big, huge beneficiary of all that.
Yeah. Well, I just love the way that the Times closes here. Even as the mask of Trump, the competent businessman, fell, the same buck passing and truth evading that had inoculated him and the rest of his family from ever facing consequences continued to come in handy. Washington was a mess in the wake of his presidency, but the Democrats were at fault, or maybe the Chinese, Antifa, immigrants, Ukraine. Donald's cannonball may have soaked us, but we must ask ourselves, why do we keep inviting him back to the pool? Want to end by asking both of you, are you hopeful that we are going to save our democracy and the justices and karma, whatever you want to call it, is finally going to come for him?
I'm always an optimistic person, so yes, I remain hopeful. I think one of the majestic things about America is our ability to self-correct, and we do that through the truth, but sometimes it takes a long, long time before the truth breaks through. And so, I remain optimistic, but yeah. I'm not sure that we can really say that cycle has run its course at this point.
All right, Susanne, if things go south, I grew up in Lockport, right across from the Canadian side of Niagara Falls. Where are we going? Where are you and I?
I'm about 4 hours from the border where I am.
Close enough.
I want to just say too, what Russ says, I'm an optimist, and I think this country, when it comes down to it, the truth matters, and hopefully that's going to bubble up to the top. I listened to Bruce Springsteen's endorsement yesterday, and it was really heartwarming. And I think we all have one vote, and some of us have, a larger voice in this. But people like that are coming forward, and I think it's 30 days left. A lot can depend on what happens in the last 2 weeks, just given the attention span of people generally.
And can I just say, I'm glad you were as relentless getting a hold of Mary Trump as I was getting a hold of you. Jody,
I'm sorry about that, but it worked. So
Yes, it did.
we got a Canadian sorry about that.
Yeah.
It's the lucky loser. You got to get
Yes.
this book, Susanne and oh God, I'm spacing
Russ.
Russ. So
There you
sorry, dear God, Susanne and Russ. Thank you so much, and thanks for your work. Amazing stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.
great, thanks. This is great.
All right.
Thank
All right,
you.
guys. Well, election season is a sweet time of the year, right? As candidates coat their messages with lots of sugar to get your vote. Yeah, I said that. Now you can enjoy the sweetness of the election with authentic candidate cookies with the likeness of Kamala and Donald on your favorite butter cookie made by the famous deli in Chicago, Max and Benny's. You can purchase these once-in-a-lifetime cookies on the Stephanie Miller, Thom Hartmann, and John Fugelsang websites. To order, go to our websites, click on the banner for cookie candidates, or go directly to their website, cookiecandidates.com.